Okay, Ute. Now this is the second session of me to discuss Ute. As I planned earlier, I'm going to discuss about measuring instrument within this class. In the early session, previous session, we have discussed the truth of interdimensions. We will continue that part in our next class. Then, this is a new session. This is a theoretical lesson. So now I'm going to start measuring instrument part. Okay. Write the main topic. Measuring instruments. Measuring instruments. Measuring instruments. Actually, when we are doing physics, measuring means taking measurements. It is a very, very important one. Okay. If you want to measure any physical quantity, you have to take some measurements. Therefore, you have to deal with taking measurements in physics. That is very, very important part in physics. Okay. Suppose if you want to calculate a velocity, then you have to take the distance and you have to take the time. Okay? You have to measure the distance and you have to measure the time. Once you measure the distance and time, then you can divide them and take the velocity. Okay, but the thing is, you have to measure the distance and time. Okay, then if you want to measure of weight, if you want to measure a weight, and if you want to measure a volume, then you have to take some measurements. No? Therefore, physics is a subject. Actually, physics is a subject that based on taking measurements and do some analysis from that measurements. Okay? We can take the measurements of distance and time. Then we can analyze about the velocity of that object. Then we can take the measurements of distance and time as well as masses. Then I can determine the forces acting on that object. After calculation about acceleration, then I can calculate the forces acting on this object. Therefore, physics is a subject that uses measurements to analyze another measurements or another physical quantities. Therefore, taking measurements means it is a very, very vital part in physics today. So to take measurements, we have to use some instrument today. So if we use some instrument, we have to have very good knowledge about those instruments. So if it is a measuring instrument, definitely if it is a measuring instrument, definitely it has a scale. Okay? If you take a meter ruler, you can clearly see it has a scale. No, if you use any kind of measuring instrument, there is a scale, because using this scale we can take the measurement. And therefore, if it is a measuring instrument, definitely it has a scale. So using that scale, we have to take the measurements of that particular physical quantity. And so in measuring instrument, we are going to discuss about what are measurements and how to measure those measurements. Then about measuring instruments. What are the measuring instruments? Then actually it's if you take about meter ruler, you cannot take the distance of very small, very thin material using meter ruler, because if I use meter ruler to take measurements of such kind of very, very small distance, definitely there may some errors. Okay. Therefore, we are going to discuss about errors. What are the errors in a measurement instrument? How to mitigate those errors? Such kind of things will be discussed under this topic. Okay. Now you can write this thing. Okay. By the topic measuring instrument today. By the topic measuring instrument. By the topic measuring instrument. That is the main topic. That is the main topic. Right under that. Measurements. Play a vital role. Measurements play a vital role in practical physics. Physics is a science. Physics is a science that based on taking measurements and performing analysis and finding correlations between those measurements. Example, velocity is equal to displacement over time. Therefore, if you want to measure a velocity, then definitely we have to take the measurements of displacement and time. Okay. Then only we can determine the velocity value. Therefore, taking measurements is very, very important part in physics. That's Right under this, right under this, right under this. If we need to determine, if we need to determine the value of velocity, the value of velocity of the velocity, we have to measure, we have to measure the distance and time. We have to measure the distance and time. We have to measure the distance and time. Right. Right. Marlon Pathirage, ඒ කියන්නේ වෙන විදිහෙන් ගත්තොත් එimhe ඇත්තටම මේ අපිට තියෙන මේ fundamental physical quantities කියලා physical quantities 8යි නෙමෙයි. Actually there are only 8 fundamental physical quantities that can directly take measurements. All the other physical quantities are derived physical quantities. That means definitely we have to have measurements to determine those physical quantities. And therefore, definitely we should do measurements. Actually, we need measurements to evaluate or to determine every physical quantity in physics. That is the actual scenario. Okay. Then, if to take a measurement, definitely there should be an instrument. There should be an instrument. And so, if we consider about instrument, instrument has a scale. Every instrument has a scale. Using that scale, we can take the particular measurement. Okay, right down this. There should be measuring instruments to take measurements. Various measuring instruments are used are used in the laboratory. Various measuring instruments are used in the laboratory. To obtain measurement, to obtain measurements. Every measuring instrument carries a scale. From which point? Pute? What is the last sentence you wrote? What is the last sentence you wrote? Then I can continue from that part. Previous one means can anyone repeat the last two sentences with it? Can anyone? Himashan, did you write?
Yes, sir.
Could you please repeat the sentence with it?
There should be measuring instrument to take measurements. Various measuring instruments are used in the laboratory to obtain measurements.
Okay.
Every measuring instrument has a scale.
There should velocity. Then you can write there should be measuring instruments. There should be measuring instruments to take measurements. There should be measuring instruments to take measurements. There should be measuring instrument to take measurements. Various measuring instruments are used in the laboratory. To take measurements. Every measuring instrument carries carries a scale. Every measuring instrument carries a scale. That's only. Horrible. Marlon Pathirage. Okay. Now this is a measuring instrument. Okay. This is a measuring instrument. So if there are so many measuring instruments, actually those measuring instrument might be an accurate instrument. But the thing is, although it is a very accurate measuring instrument, actually we cannot 100% assure about their values. We cannot assure 100% because any measuring instrument has a limitation. Beyond that limitation, it cannot take an accurate measurement. Okay. What is that? Look at this one. Suppose this is a meter ruler. Now this is a meter ruler. No, those are the mark or those are the divisions in meter ruler. Now I'm going to place a rod to take the length. Okay, I'm going to place a rod. Now this is the rod. You have to take the measurement of this rod. Look at this one. Although the meter ruler, suppose the meter ruler is a very accurate meter ruler. Okay. Although the meter ruler is a very, very accurate measuring instrument, actually meter ruler has made so many errors, but suppose if the meter ruler is a very accurate measuring instrument, even though it is a very accurate measuring instrument, look at this one. You have to measure this kind of rod. You know, up to this level, measuring instrument has divisions. But after that one, we cannot determine the end point of the rod. We cannot determine. So in such cases, we have to assume assume a value. Otherwise, there's no any other way. There's no any other way. We have to assume a value. Therefore, although this is an accurate measuring instrument, there is some limitation. There is some limitation to that measuring instrument. Measuring instrument to instrument, that limitation will be varied. Okay, measuring instrument to instrument, that limitation varies. But the thing is, there's a limitation. What is that limitation? What is that limitation? In between two consecutive marks, there is no any value. So if there's a value in between those two marks, then it cannot be measured. It can be measured, but the thing is, we have to assume the value. If we assume the value, definitely there might be an error. That is not an accurate value because we have to assume. Did you get my point?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. එහෙනම් තේරුම් ගන්න ඕනේ මෙච්චරයි මොකක් measuring instrument එක මොන තරම් අර හත්බහම measuring instrument එකක් වුණත් පුතේ වැඩක් නැහැ. මේ වගේ රොඩ් එකක් දුන්නොත් එතනම චරලස්. හරිද? මොකද measuring instrument එකේ වැඩක් නැහැ. measuring instrument එකේ out of scale එකයි යන්නේ. හරි scale එකේ ඒ out of scale කියලා කියන්නේ මෙයාගේ scale එකක් නැහැ එයා measure කරන්න. එතන අනිවාර්යෙන් error එකක් පොකවන. හරිද? ඒකයි මෙතන තියෙන problem එක. ඒක තමයි මේවා ඇතුළේ limitation. Okay. We can write down the theme. Write it in the para. Write it in the para. No measuring instrument. No measuring instrument. No measuring instrument. No measuring instrument. Gives no measuring instrument gives the most accurate measurement. The most accurate measurements. Measurement. There might be deviations. There might be deviations. There might be deviations. From the 100% accurate value. From the 100% accurate value. There might be deviations from the 100% accurate value. The reason is the reason is the limitations the reason is the limitations associated with the measuring instrument. The reason is the limitations associated with the measuring instrument. Okay. Right. Draw this example. This is the example. Draw this one quickly. Once you complete drawing, please let me know.
Done, sir.
Thank you. Others? Okay. Now please mention this one as C unit. Method C unit लगाना. तो मैंने क्या है C. Okay. Write down under the figure. Write down under the figure. Suppose We are going to measure, suppose we are going to measure the length of AB rod. The length of AB rod using a meter ruler. Using a meter ruler. Using a meter ruler. That should be mentioned. Meter ruler. This is a meter ruler. Please mention that. Okay, write down this. We can take an accurate measurement. We can take an accurate measurement we can take an accurate measurement from A to C, from A to C, from A to C, from A to C. But B is placed, B is placed, B is placed, but B is placed B is placed in between two adjacent marks. In between two adjacent marks. In between two adjacent marks. Therefore, we cannot take, therefore, we cannot take, therefore, we cannot take the exact length accurately. Therefore, we cannot take the exact length accurately. Okay, I will repeat it for you. B is placed in between two adjacent marks. In between two adjacent marks. In between two adjacent marks. Therefore, we cannot take the exact length accurately. The exact length accurately. Exact length accurately. That causes error in the reading. That causes error in the reading. Okay, Vijay. Suppose now this is a meter ruler. This is not a meter ruler. Suppose this is a meter ruler. Now you are asked to measure. The thickness of this paper. You are asked to measure the thickness of this paper. This is a meter ruler. Suppose this is a meter ruler, and you are asked to measure the thickness of this paper. Can you use a meter ruler to take the thickness of this paper? Can you use? Can you use a meter ruler to take the thickness of this paper? Huh? No, why? What is the reason? What is the reason?
It's not accurate.
What is the reason today? Actually, if you want to get a so if it is a thickness of a paper, if you place the paper, it might be something like this. It is very, very small. It is very, very small. It is something like this. This is a meter rule. Therefore, definitely, we have to fully assume. We cannot measure this one. Okay? Because meter rule is not suitable to measure this kind of measurement. And actually, if you want to measure a measurement using a meter ruler, at least actually it can be measured. It can be measured using this scales. Otherwise, we cannot take the measurement. We cannot take an accurate measurement. Okay. Therefore, any instrument has a least count. What is a least count? Least count means it is the smallest measurement. It is the smallest measurement that can be measured using that particular instrument. It is the smallest measurement. So what is the smallest measurement of a instrument? Suppose this is a scale. You know this scale is Suppose this is 0, this one 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Actually, look at this one. If you want to measure measurement, or if you want to take a measurement, if you want to take a measurement, definitely, if you want to take an accurate measurement, definitely you have to measure that measurement using those gaps, using those gaps. If it is one gap, then you are going to say it is 1 millimeter. If it is two gaps, it is equal to 2 millimeter. If it is three gaps, it is equal to 3 millimeter. Therefore, actually, what are you going to do is you are going to use those gaps to measure the particular measurement. Then suppose you are going to measure the distance from A to C. Suppose you are going to take the distance from A to C, and we are going to say it is equal to 4. It is equal to 4. How did you say that one? Look at this one. 1, 2, 3, 4 gaps. There are 4 gaps here. That's why you say the distance from A to C is equal to 4. Actually, when you are taking measurements, you are going to take how many gaps are there? That is equal to the number written about this mark. Did you get my point? Now there is one gap. That's why it written as 1. There are 2 gaps. That's why it written as 2. There are 3 gaps. That's why it written as 3. Okay. So if you take this, place, that means from here to here there are 6 gaps. If you take this place, that means from here to here there are 7 gaps. Actually, you are going to take measurement using gaps. Did you get my point?
Yes.
Therefore, the smallest measurement that can be measured. Therefore, the smallest measurement that can be measured using this instrument should be equal to what? Should be equal to 1 gap, one gap, not in this case 1 millimeter, but it should be equal to 1 gap. It should be equal to 1 gap because you are going to measure, or you are going to take the measurement using gaps. Therefore, the smallest measurement that you can measure using this instrument is equal to 1 gap. Did you get my point? Fair logic here. Clear?
Yes.
What about others? Anita?
Yes, sir.
Respond as
Yes.
well? Thank you. එහෙනම් බලන්න පුතේ අනිවාර්යෙන් අපි ඉන්ස්ට්‍රුමන්ට් එකකින් මෙෂර්මන්ට් එකක් ගන්නවා කියලා කියන්නේ ඇත්තටම මේ මිලිමීටර් 4යි මිලිමීටර් 5යි මිලිමීටර් 6යි ඕක කියන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ කියන්නේ මොකක්ද පුතේ ඇත්තටම? ඒ කියන්නේ මෙතන ඉඳන් මෙතනට ගැප්ස් කීයක් තිබ්බද? නේ? මෙතන ඉඳන් මෙතනට ගැප්ස් 5යි. ඒකම මෙතන ගැප් 5යි කියලා දාන්න. නේ? 1 2 3 4 5 gaps. There are 5 gaps here from here to here. That's why I mark 5 here. Okay. Therefore, taking measurement means counting how many gaps are there. Therefore, the smallest measurement is equal to 1 gap. It is equal to 1 gap. That is called the least count of that particular instrument. The least count. Therefore, when you are going to take a measurement, you have to have an understanding about the least count of that particular measurement, particular instrument. Because you cannot take a smaller value than the least count. That is the smallest measurement that you can take using that particular instrument. Right? Okay. We can write the topic. You know, write topic area. Least count of an instrument. Least count of an instrument. මට ඔයාලා මේ gaps කියන තේරුම් ගන්නද කියන එක මම බලා කරනවා gaps කියන එක මාර වැදගත් වෙනවා මට ඉස්සරහට. හරිද? Okay. Topic is least count. Topic is least count. Least count of an instrument. Right? Under that. Right under that. Don't draw anything. The smallest measurement. The smallest measurement. The smallest measurement that can be measured. That can be measured. That can be measured. Using a measuring instrument. Using a measuring instrument. Instrument is called the least count of that instrument. Draw this one.
Done, sir.
Okay, good. Right on that. Right on that. Suppose we are going to take a reading. We are going to take a reading using an instrument. එහෙනම් reading එක කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? The reading is equal to the number of gaps. The number of gaps from A to අපි ගත්තොත් එimhe පුරාණ ඔයාලට තියෙනවා මෙතන මේකත් අඳ ගන්න. පුරාණ මේක අඳ ගන්න. ඉතින් තියෙනවා. The reading is equal to the number of gaps from A to C. The number of gaps from A to C. That is the meaning of reading. Okay. Therefore, a measurement is equal a measurement is equal to the number of gaps to the number of gaps to the number of gaps with respect to with respect to a certain scale. With respect to a certain scale. Therefore, the least count of an instrument is equal to one gap of the scale. One gap of the scale. In this case, this gap is equal to 1 millimeter. Okay, but if it is 5 millimeter, it can be 5 millimeter, 3 millimeter. Hey, it can be anything. Okay, I don't know, it can be anything, but anyway, the least count should be equal to this single gap. Okay, according to our scale, the single gap can be equal to 1 millimeter. It can be equal to 2 millimeter. No, not 1 millimeter, kilogram, anything. Okay, and because if I'm going to represent 2 millimeter in one gap, then I can write 2, 4, 6 like that. Okay, so it can be anything, but the thing is least count is equal to a single gap. Because it is the smallest quantity that can be measured using that particular instrument. So the least count of an instrument is equal to the single gap. The single gap between therefore the least count of an instrument is equal to single gap between two adjacent marks. Therefore, the least count of an instrument is equal single gap, or you can write this gap. Okay? Just gap. The gap is the gap between single gap or the gap between two adjacent marks. The gap between two adjacent marks. This is very important. Very, very important. Alright. උදේ මේක මම මතක තියාගන්න මේක හැම වෙලෙම බේසික් එක තේරුම් ගන්න. හරි මාරු ලීසි එතකොට. ගොඩාක් වෙලා ළමයි කටපාඩම් කරනවා. මේකේ ගොඩක් වෙලා මේකෙන් වලින්න පුළුවන් මේ පොඩිම මේ වැලියු එක තමයි මේක කියන්නේ. ඕවා කටපාඩම් කරගන්න. හරි. කටපාඩම් කරගන්න එපා. හැම වෙලෙම තේරුම් ගන්න මොකක්ද මේ ඉන්ස්ට්‍රුමන්ට් එකක් කියලා කියන්නේ. ඉන්ස්ට්‍රුමන්ට් එකක් means කියන්නේ ඇත්තටම මෙතන තියෙන ස්කේල් එකක් නේ. ඇත්තටම මෙතන තියෙන ස්කේල් එකක්. එහෙනම් මොකද වෙන්නේ? ඔයාට මනින්න පුළුවන් පොඩිම වැලියුව කියලා කියන්නේ ස්කේල් එකේ අර එක ගැප් එකක්. here in the gap in between in between two adjacent marks, we cannot take measurement. We cannot take an accurate measure. ඒ නිසා මතක තියාගන්න gap එකක් කියන්නේ. මොකද ඒක මාරම වටින point එකක්. මොකද ඔයාලට බොහොම ලේසියෙන් questions කරන්න පුළුවන් මේ දේ තේරුම් ගත්තොත්. නැත්තම් මේ කටපාඩම් කරන්න වෙනවා ඔයාලට equations 100ක් විතර. හරිද? මතක තියාගත්තට කමන්නේ සමහර දේවල් තේරෙන්නේ නැහැ මොකද්ද මේ equation එක කියන්නේ කියලා. හරි? එහෙම වෙන්න පුළුවන් අපිට. හැබැයි basic එක තේරුම් ගත්තොත් මාරම ලේසි. හරි? හොඳයි. එහෙනම් මේකේ gap එක තමයි මම gap එකම තමයි දිගටම යන්නේ gap එකෙන්මයි. හරි? Okay. Now there is a problem. In some scale, actually the width of the gap may not be equal or may be constant. It may vary. It may vary. Suppose you are given this kind of instrument. You are given this kind of instrument. What is that? Huh? The gap between two adjacent marks varies throughout this scale. And මෙහෙම instrument තියෙනත් පුළුවන්. මෙහෙම instrument තියෙනවා. හරිද? ඔයාලා දැකලත් ඇති. දැකලා තියෙන මේ වගේ instrument එකක්. දැකලා තියෙනවා මතක නැහැ. हाँ मेरा ये शॉट है देखा मल्टीमीटर्स देखा थी राधे मल्टीमीटर्स सर मल्टीमीटर्स सर कौन तो वाला रेजिस्टर्स में स्केलिंग रेजिस्टर्स में स्केल देखा थी ना पास हमारे लड़ देखा है तो बंदरने और वैसे लगा दिया और वैसे टारेली में भी रेजिस्टर्स से लगा प्रैक्टिकल करा रहा देखा रहती है मल्टीमीटर्स तो मतलब देखा थी बाहर नहीं कि रेजिस्टेंस स्केल का तो तेरे पति विनष्ट ये वाला विनष्ट निष्पत्ति तेरे को and therefore now you are given an instrument in that instrument the width of gap varies throughout the scale. Now tell me what is the least count of this instrument? What is the least count of this instrument? What are the least count? Very good, Patu. Very, very good. It should be the smallest gap, no? It should be the smallest gap. If there are gaps, where is if the width of the gap varies, then the least count should be the smallest gap. Okay. Write a note. That is special note. Here. Note can make underline. Please do this one. Okay, write under this, suppose you are given suppose you are given a measuring instrument that has a scale as mentioned above. The width of the gap. The width of the gaps. Varies throughout the scale. Okay. Therefore, the least count should be equal to the smallest gap. In this case. You see, for the smallest gap in this case. අපි පුතේ දැන් least count එක කතා කරා. Now we have discussed least count. What is the least count? Okay, as I mentioned earlier, if we have suppose in our first example, there was a rod. Actually, we have to take the measurement length of that rod. But the thing was, the edge, the end corner was in between two adjacent marks. Therefore, it is obvious we cannot take an accurate measurement. So, if you are given such kind of measurements, if you are given such kind of objects to be measured, then definitely there will be errors. Definitely there will be errors in your measurements. Therefore, we have to determine the maximum error involved with an instrument. Okay. Therefore, you have to measure the maximum error involved with that instrument. As our first example, actually there was a ruler, and we have placed a rod like this. So up to this point, we can measure, we can take an accurate reading. But from here to here, we have to assume. From here to here, we have to assume this gap. Actually, this gap, suppose if we use another scale, that is very smaller one, sometimes that error can be reduced. Actually, it can be reduced. Now I can get an accurate value up to this point. Now we can get an now I can get an accurate value up to this point. Previously, it was up to this point. Now it is up to this point. Therefore, accurate reading increases. That means my error decreases. Therefore, if I use another scale, my error can be reduced. Okay. Therefore, instrument to instrument, scale to scale, that error might be changed, might be different. Okay. Therefore, we have to determine the maximum error involved with a measuring instrument. Okay. Then write a topic. Maximum error associated with a measuring instrument. The maximum error associated with a measuring instrument. Okay, you can go this one. When you are drawing, please make sure there should be equal gaps. Arakamai. හරිද? Once you complete drawing, please let me know. Okay,
Done, sir.
thank you, Uday. Write down this thing. They write down this thing. As mentioned earlier, we can take an accurate measurement. We can take an accurate measurement from A to C, from A to C. But we have to assume a value. We have to assume a value for X. Okay, look at the board again. Now we have to assume a value for X. Tell me. Now there are there's a spin of thing. I want to answer from everyone. Tell me a value for X. Tell me a value for X. Suppose a value for X.
0.5.
Suppose a value for X. 0.5. One answer is 0.5. That is one answer. Is there any other accurate value? 0.6. 0.6. One says 0.6. How? You can tell anything. Yeah. Another one says 0.4. 0.4. 0.4. 0.5, 0.4, 0.6. Those are the answers. So according to your visual capacity and the way of looking at this position, you can assign a value. It varies. Actually, it varies. That value varies from here to here. Here to here. Yeah. It varies from here to here. Yeah. It cannot go beyond that one. It value should be varied from here to here. That means it should be varied within that gap only. It cannot go beyond that one. And the value of X varies from here to here. From here to here, you can assign any value according to your visual inspection. According to your visual inspection, you can assign any value. Someone says 4, someone says 0.6, someone says 0.5. I don't know the correct value. I don't know the correct value. But look at this. Look at this. But look at this. If there is an error, in that reading, I don't know what is the error, how much the error, but I can say what can be the maximum error. What can be the maximum error associated with this reading? So, can you propose the maximum error? මොකක්ද මෙතන maximum error කියන්නේ කොහොමද? What can be the maximum error? Today I don't know the value of x. I don't know it. So suppose someone says 0.5. So if the actual value subtracted by 0.5, then I can take the error. I can take the error. If the actual value subtracted from 0.6, then I can take the error. But the maximum error cannot go beyond this gap. Cannot go beyond this gap. It cannot go beyond this gap. Therefore, the maximum error is equal to the width of this gap. It cannot go beyond that one. It cannot go beyond that one. Therefore, maximum error associated with that instrument should be equal to its least count. Its least count, because it cannot go beyond that value. I don't know. Sometimes it may be 0.1. Someone can say it is 0.1. Someone can say it is 0.9. How can we justify? I cannot justify that for no. If someone says, sir, it is 0.1, can I give a justification for you? No, I cannot. If someone says it is equal to 0.9, I don't know, because there is no any scale here. How can I say whether it is correct or not? I cannot say, because it is he or she, because according to person, their visual inspections varies. And therefore, x can be varied from 0.1, that means from 3 to 4. From 3 to 4. It can be get any value from 3 to 4. Therefore, the maximum error occurred, that can be occurred during this measurement, should be equal to this gap. Did you get my point? They know my point. They know my point.
Yes, sir.
Maximum එක තමයි maximum error එක. ඒ කියන්නේ error එක පුතේ maximum error එකට වඩා අඩු වෙන්න පුළුවන්. The error might be lesser than the maximum error, but I'm talking about maximum error, because error cannot go beyond this gap. And therefore, definitely the maximum error should be equal to this gap putte. That means definitely the maximum error should be equal to the least count of that particular instrument. What about others? Tevunada? Anitara Tevunada?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Putte.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay. Write down this thing, Putte. We cannot assign a value for x. We cannot assign an exact value for x. therefore, we can assume any value. We can assume any value in between 3 and 4. In between 3 and 4. As x is in x as x is in between 2 consecutive marks, 2 consecutive marks, 2 consecutive marks අපි දැන් උදාහරණ පුතේ. බලන්න මෙයා ඉන්නේ පුතේ මේ දෙන්න අතරින්. Therefore I can assume the range. එහෙනම් මේ x ට ගන්න පුළුවන් range එක පුතේ මෙතන කොහොමද ගන්න පුළුවන්. Therefore the range of x is equal to this gap, ne? To this gap is equal to the gap between 2 adjacent marks. The gap between 2 adjacent marks. හරිද? එහෙනම් ඒ පාර මෙයාගේ රේන්ජ් එක පුතේ රේන්ජ් එකේ වෙන්නේ මේ ગેප් එක. මෙතන මේ ગેප් එකේ මෙතන ඕනේ වැලියුවක් එක්ස්ට්‍රා ගන්න පුළුවන්. ඔයා මොන වැලියුවක් කිව්වත් ඒක ඔයාලට ජස්ටිෆයි කරන්න, ඒ කියන්නේ ඒක වැරදි කියලා කියන්න අමාරුයි. ඒක වැරදි කියලා කියන්න අමාරුයි. හරි? මොකද වැලියුවක් නැතුව අපි කොහොමද කියන්නේ? අපිට පොයින්ට් එකක් හදාගන්න බෑ. හරි? ඒක නිසා the maximum error, therefore the maximum error associated with that reading is equal to this gap. හරි? ඒ කියන්නේ වෙන්න පුළුවන් වැරදිම reading එක මොකද්ද පුතේ? හිතන්නකො එක්කෙනෙක් මෙතන ඉන්නවා කියන්නේ. හිතන්නකො x මෙතන තියෙනවා කියන්නේ. x මෙතන තියෙනවා නේ. මෙතනම තියෙනවා. බොහෝම පොඩ්ඩක් තියෙනවා. මෙතනම තියෙන x ට, ඒ කියන්නේ මෙතනම තියෙන x ට කාටද කියන්න පුළුවන් ජරාම වැලියු එක තමයි එයා මෙතන නේ මෙතන තියෙන්නේ කියලා නේ. නේද? ඒකට කරන්න පුළුවන් ජරාම කැපම වැලියු නේද? එහෙනම් ඒක තමයි මැක්සිමම් රීඩින් එක. නේද? ඒක තමයි මැක්සිමම් එරර් එක වෙන්නේ. හරිද? මේක හරියට ඇත්තටම අපිට බලනකොට පේනවා මේක 0.11. හරි. නමුත් කවුරුද කියනවා නෑ ඔය 0.1 නෙවෙයි ඔය 0.9 කියලා. So ඕක තමයි දෙන්න පුළුවන් ජරා වැඩි. නේ? අයන ඒක තමයි ඊට පුළුවන් මැක්සිමම් එක. මොකද අපිට ඌ වැරදි කියන්න බෑ. මොකද වැරදි කියන හේතු නෑ. හරිද? ඒ කියන්නේ අපි visual inspection එකක් විතරයි අපිට තියෙන්නේ. හරි. visual inspection එක කියලා කියන්නේ ෆැක්ට් එකක් නෙමෙයි. ඒ නිසා අපිට ඒක ජස්ටිෆයි කරන්න බෑ. Okay. Therefore, the maximum error, associated with the reading is equal to the gap between two marks. To the gap between two adjacent marks. Okay. Therefore, the maximum error of an instrument. The maximum error of an instrument is equal to its least count. Is equal to the least count of the instrument. That is the most important part. ඒක තමයි වෙන්න පුළුවන් වැඩිම error එක ඔය instrument එක පාවිච්චි කරනකොට. ඔය instrument එක පාවිච්චි කරනකොට වෙන්න පුළුවන් වැඩිම error එක තමයි පුතේ යාගේ least count එක. හරිද? least count එක තමයි mislead කරන්න පුළුවන් වැඩිම මේ error එක. ඒක මම කියන්නේ කරන්න පුළුවන් ජරාම වැඩි point එකක් වගේ තියෙනකොට ඒක point එක නෙවෙයි නෑ point 9 කියන එකට කරන්න පුළුවන් ජරාම වැඩි. එහෙනම් ඒක තමයි යන්න පුළුවන් maximum error එක. Did you get my point? Everyone, did you get my point? I need responses from everyone.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Thank you, Budhe. ඔය උදේ හරිද මම අපිට මේ ආන්සර් එකක් දීලා තිබ්බා මොකද්ද මේ maximum error එක x කියන එක ඒක value of x. ලෙසන් දුන්නේ බලන්න මේ පුතේ මේක තමයි x කියන දේ මම කොහොමද දන්නේ x කියන එක මම දන්නේ නැහැ x තමයි මේ වැලියු එකක් ගන්න යන්නේ හරිද x කියන එක දන්නේ නැහැ x කියන එක vary වෙන්න පුළුවන් මේ from 0 0.1 to 0.9 අපිට ඕන දැන් එක vary වෙන්න පුළුවන් හරිද පුතේ ඒක මේ මට දැන් මෙයාගේ maximum error එක x කියලා කියන්න බෑ මොකද x කියලා කියන දේ මම දන්නේ x දන්නවද x දන්නේ x තමයි මම මේ වැලියු එකක් assign කරන්න හදන්නේ x assign කරන වැලියු එක ඇතුලේ තමයි මේ error එක තියෙන්නේ එහෙනම් error එක අර මම කිව්වා වගේ කවුරු හරි කිව්වොත් 0.1 කියලා තව කෙනෙක් කිව්වොත් නෑ 0.9 කියලා එහෙනම් ඔය දෙන්නෙන් කාව justify කරන්න බෑනේ එහෙනම් ඒ දෙක අතර තමයි තියෙන්න පුළුවන් maximum error එක තියෙන්නේ did you get my point පුතේ ලෙසන් දෙන්නාද okay thank you okay do you have any questions regarding today's lesson do you have any questions regarding today's lesson especially measuring instrument do you have any question thank you thank you you have watched this already okay then we can complete today's lesson today because now there's no time to start another thing now we can complete today's lesson if you have any question now it is time to ask do you have any questions the other question question okay then we can complete today's class today I will share all the recordings especially about our new new website you have to watch that thing and you can create your own account and if there's any technical problem please let me know first before you are going to access from that website please let me know first because if I can assist you then I can assist you if I cannot assist you then I can direct to that technical team okay therefore if you have any questions please let me know first okay then I can direct to the solution okay then we can complete today's class today everyone good night
Thank you, sir. Good night.
Good night, sir. Thank you, sir.
okay welcome